Forget everything you think you know about power. The most pivotal moment of the year didn't happen in a boardroom, it happened on a cold street corner, sealed not with a signature, but with a single piece of bread. That one simple act of charity was the trigger for a chain reaction that would expose a dark world of secrets, dismantle a powerful family from the inside out, and spark the most unexpected love story of our time. This is the explosive, untold story of the day. A homeless boy shared his last bread with a woman not knowing she was a rich heiress, and the final truth is a secret the wealthy never wanted you to find out. Our story has two players living in completely different universes. The first is Lawrence Warren, a man with nothing to his name but a fierce sense of integrity, a homeless boy who the world had rendered invisible. The other is Jade Long, a rich heiress with a fortune so vast it was a prison. She was suffocating in her gilded cage, so she created a secret identity, embarking on a dangerous, undercover mission to find the one thing her billions couldn't buy: a single, genuinely good person. But a connection this pure, born from a secret, could not go unnoticed. In the opulent world Jade tried to escape, a dark and powerful force watched her with growing suspicion. Her fiancé, a man as cruel as he was wealthy, would not tolerate being defied. He saw Lawrence not as a person, but as an infestation to be exterminated. The fragile, secret friendship was on a collision course with a ruthless world determined to crush it at any cost. That single piece of bread, an act of pure kindness, quickly became the catalyst for an all-out war. This story spirals into a brutal test of character, involving public humiliation, secret acts of incredible heroism, and a life-changing choice that leads to an explosive final confrontation. This isn't just a tale of good versus evil, it's a story about redemption and revenge, proving that true power isn't held by those with money, but by those with nothing left to lose. Before we detonate this incredible story, I want you to be part of the global community we're building right here. Drop a comment below and let us know what city you're watching from, so we can see the full reach of our family. And if you're ready for a story that will shake you to your core, prove it by hitting that like button, subscribing right now so you never miss a revelation, and sharing this with someone who needs to believe that destiny has a plan for us all. It all started on a Tuesday, or maybe a Wednesday. Days kinda blend together when you're living on the street. For Lawrence Warren, it was just another day of survival, a relentless cycle of finding a safe place to rest and a scrap of food to quiet the gnawing in his stomach. He was, for all intents and purposes, a homeless boy, invisible to the bustling city that rushed past him. This particular afternoon, had managed to get his hands on a small, stale piece of bread. It wasn't much, but it was everything. His little slice of heaven. He was about to take that first glorious bite when he saw her. She was huddled in a nearby alley, looking even more lost and beaten down by the world than he felt. There was a tremor in her hands, a deep-seated weariness in her eyes that spoke of a different kind of poverty of the soul, perhaps. You see, an act of kindness isn't a transaction, it's a reflex of the heart. And in that moment, Lawrence's heart made a decision his stomach would surely protest against later. It was a choice that would seal his destiny. Without a second thought, he walked over. He didn't say much. What was there to say? Words are cheap when you've got nothing else. He simply broke his last piece of bread in half and offered it to her. A gesture so pure and selfless, it seemed to hang in the air between them. The woman, who he didn't know was the rich heiress Jade Long, looked up, her eyes wide with a sort of shocked disbelief. For her, this was an unexpected moment, a glimmer of light in a world she had come to see as utterly dark. She took the bread, her fingers brushing against his. It was a fleeting touch, but it sparked something profound, an unspoken connection that neither of them could have anticipated. This simple exchange was more than just sharing food, it was a life-altering moment. A pebble tossed into the still waters of their separate lives, destined to create ripples that would become waves. This was the beginning of an unlikely love story, though they were blissfully unaware of the monumental shift that had just occurred. He simply nodded and walked away, not wanting to make her feel like she owed him anything. He didn't know her name, her story, or the secret identity she so carefully guarded beneath her plain clothes. All he saw was another human being who needed help. For Lawrence Warren, it was a simple act of decency, but for Jade Long, it was a revelation. This homeless boy had shown her more genuine compassion than anyone in her gilded cage ever had. And so, as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the cold pavement, the seeds of a life-changing journey were sown. He was a boy with nothing, and she was an heiress with everything. Yet he had given her a gift that money could never buy, proof that true goodness still existed. He couldn't possibly fathom the plot twist his life was about to take, all because of a single instinctual act of grace. Let's be clear, life on the streets isn't some romantic struggle, it's a brutal soul-crushing grind. For Lawrence Warren, each sunrise brought not hope, but a fresh set of challenges. The biting cold that seeps into your bones, the constant, gnawing hunger, and the crushing weight of invisibility from a society that would rather look away. He was a homeless boy, and that label was a sentence to a life of hardship. It's a daily battle, a test of will that most people couldn't endure for a single day, let alone years. His existence was a masterclass in overcoming adversity. He learned to read the city's rhythms, where to find shelter from the rain, which bakery threw out day-old bread, and how to stay safe from those who would prey on the vulnerable. Every single day was a fight, not for a better life, but simply for the continuation of this one. Yet, through it all, something inside him remained unbroken, a core of decency that the city's cruelty couldn't tarnish. This was his most guarded possession. It's one thing to be kind when you have everything. It's another thing entirely to show kindness when you have nothing. Lawrence's compassion wasn't a choice, it was his nature. He'd give his spot in a soup kitchen line to someone older, share his thin blanket with another soul shivering in the cold. These small, heart-aching acts were a rebellion against the bitterness that threatened to consume him. He refused to let his circumstances define his character, a quiet protest against his fate. This wasn't about being a saint. It was about holding onto the one thing they couldn't take from him, his humanity. The struggle was immense, an emotional toll that left scars no one could see. He had every reason to be angry, to be selfish, to take what he could, but he didn't. Instead, he chose a harder path, the path of integrity. His life was a testament to the idea that wealth has nothing to do with what's in your pockets, and everything to do with what's in your heart. People saw a homeless boy and immediately looked down, filled with pity or disgust. They never saw the resilience, the quiet dignity, the unwavering spirit that burned within him. They couldn't see the strength it took just to get through another day without surrendering to despair. He was a forgotten soldier in a war nobody wanted to admit was happening on their own doorsteps, fighting battles that would never earn him a medal. But his reality, as harsh as it was, had shaped him into a person of rare character. It had forged him in a fire that would have turned most men to ash. And it was this very quality, this light that refused to be extinguished, that had unknowingly caught the attention of someone who had been searching for it her entire life. A woman who lived in a world that was the complete opposite of his. Now, let's flip the coin. Meet Jade Long, the rich heiress to a fortune so vast it could reshape city skylines. Her world wasn't one of cold pavement and hunger, but of cold marble and suffocating expectations. From the outside, she had it all: mansions, private jets, and a name that opened every door. But on the inside, she was trapped in a gilded cage, surrounded by people who saw her not as a person, but as a prize, a commodity, a walking bank vault. Her life was a lonely affair, a constant performance for a greedy audience. Her family, her friends, her fiancé all wore masks of affection, but their eyes held the unmistakable glint of opportunism. They spoke of love, but their actions screamed of ambition. This relentless insincerity had hollowed her out, leaving her feeling more isolated in a crowded ballroom than Lawrence ever felt on a deserted street. She was a hidden rich girl, hiding not her wealth, but her profound loneliness. Tired of the charade, of the endless parade of sycophants, Jade made an unexpected decision. She concocted a secret identity. Stripping away the designer labels and the family name, she began to walk the city streets as a simple, unassuming woman. She wasn't looking for pity or adventure, she was on a mission. A desperate, almost naive, search for one genuinely good person. Someone whose kindness wasn't a means to an end. It was a quest to restore her own faith in humanity. For months, her search yielded nothing but disappointment. She saw the same greed she knew from her world, just packaged differently. She saw people step over those in need, avert their eyes, and hoard what little they had. Her heart grew heavier with each passing day, the hope that fueled her experiment beginning to flicker and fade. She was starting to believe that, perhaps, her cynical world was right, that true selflessness was just a myth, a fairy tale for children. The emptiness of her life was a different kind of poverty. It was a poverty of the spirit, a starvation for authenticity in a world that feasted on lies. Her disguise was not just about hiding her wealth, it was about revealing the truth in others. She wanted to be seen for who she was, not what she had. This deep, emotional need drove her to the city's forgotten corners, searching for a sign, any sign, that she was wrong about the world. And just as she was about to give up, to retreat back to her beautiful prison and accept her destiny of loveless luxury, she found herself huddled in an alley, beaten down by her own disillusionment. It was then that a homeless boy approached her. He had nothing, yet he offered her half of his everything. In that single, heart-aching moment, her entire world and her entire quest was turned completely upside down. That single act of sharing bread was a seismic event in Jade's life. It wasn't just kindness, it was a profound statement from a homeless boy who had every right to be selfish. Deeply moved, she couldn't get the encounter out of her head. The next day, still in her disguise, she felt an irresistible pull to return to that part of the city. She told herself it was just to thank him properly, but deep down, she knew it was more than that. She had to see him again, to understand the man behind the gesture. She found Lawrence Warren in a small forgotten park, reading a discarded book. Hesitantly, she approached, and a conversation started. It was simple at first, just two people talking. But for Jade, it was revolutionary. There were no hidden agendas, no calculated compliments. He spoke to her with a straightforward honesty that was as refreshing as a cool breeze on a sweltering day. She was captivated by his integrity, a quality as rare as a diamond in her own circles. Their visits soon became a regular occurrence, a secret ritual that became the highlight of her days. She would bring a little extra food to share, and in return, he would share his thoughts, his observations about the world from his unique vantage point. It was a simple, budding friendship, the foundation of an unlikely love story. She was mesmerized by his pure heart, a heart that hadn't been corrupted by bitterness or envy, despite the world's relentless cruelty toward him. Still maintaining her secret identity, she learned about his dreams, the life he had before misfortune struck. He wasn't just a statistic, he was a person with depth, intelligence, and a quiet resilience that humbled her. Each conversation was a heart-aching experience, chipping away at the cynicism that had encrusted her own heart. This homeless boy was teaching the rich heiress what it truly meant to be wealthy in spirit, and she was a very eager student. She felt a connection with Lawrence that was more real and emotional than anything she had ever felt with her high society fiancé. With Lawrence, she wasn't Jade Long, the heiress. She was just Jade, a person. This was the authenticity she had been starving for. Their time together was a sanctuary from the lies of her other life, a place where genuine love and friendship could actually breathe and grow, free from the toxic smog of greed. But such a pure, secret world is fragile. It exists in a delicate balance, and she knew, with a growing sense of dread, that it couldn't last forever. The stark contrast between her two lives was becoming unbearable, a ticking clock counting down to an inevitable collision. She was falling for him, but a storm was brewing on the horizon, a storm in the form of the man who believed he owned her. The inevitable collision happened on a crisp autumn afternoon. Jade and Lawrence were sitting on their usual park bench, lost in a conversation so deep it created a world just for them. The bubble of their secret friendship was abruptly burst by the arrival of a sleek black car that screamed of old money and arrogance. Out stepped Julian, Jade's fiancé, his handsome face contorted into a mask of pure disgust. He had been having her followed. The surprise was sickening. Julian didn't even acknowledge Jade at first. His eyes, cold and merciless, were locked on Lawrence. He looked him up and down, taking in his worn-out clothes and the simple fact of his existence with theatrical contempt. "What is this?" he sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. "Jade, darling, are you collecting stray animals now? You can't possibly be entertaining this street rat." The words were designed to be daggers, and they hit their mark. The humiliation was brutal and public. Julian strode over to Lawrence, who had instinctively stood up, and flicked a piece of lint off his own designer coat. "Tell me," Julian said, his voice dangerously low, "how much is she paying you to be her little charity project?" "I'll double it. Just crawl back to whatever gutter you slithered out of and never let me see your pathetic face near her again." He then pulled out a wad of cash and threw it at Lawrence's feet. The raw cruelty of the act was breathtaking. It was a test of character, of the highest order, a calculated assault meant to shatter a man's dignity. Lawrence Warren, the quiet, kind homeless boy, was being brutally dismantled in front of the one person whose opinion had started to matter to him. For Jade, watching this unfold was an out-of-body experience. The ugliness of her world was on full display, a grotesque spectacle of power and privilege being used as a weapon. She saw the flash of pain in Lawrence's eyes, a flicker of deep, emotional hurt that he quickly masked. The air crackled with tension. Julian stood there, smug and triumphant, waiting for the beggar to scoop up the money, or perhaps to lash out in anger to prove him right. He wanted a reaction, a confirmation that Lawrence was exactly the worthless animal he believed him to be. This was more than an insult, it was a declaration of war between two completely different worlds. This was a defining moment, a crossroads that would forever alter the course of their destiny. Jade held her breath, her heart pounding in her chest. Everything hinged on what Lawrence would do next. His response to this unprovoked, vicious attack would reveal the true measure of his soul. It was a moment pregnant with a plot twist no one, especially not Julian, could have ever seen coming. In the face of Julian's venomous attack, the world seemed to hold its breath. Anyone else might have yelled, cursed, or even thrown a punch. They would have been justified. But Lawrence Warren did none of those things. He didn't even glance at the money scattered on the ground. Instead, he slowly raised his eyes and looked directly at Julian, not with hatred, but with a profound, unshakable calm. It was the most unexpected reaction possible. He held Julian's gaze for a long moment, his silence more powerful than any shout could ever be. Then, in a voice devoid of anger or shame, he said, "You can't buy dignity, sir. And you can't take away something from a man who already knows its true worth." With that, he simply gave a small, polite nod, turned his back on Julian and the money, and began to walk away. It was an act of quiet rebellion, a display of inner strength that was utterly magnificent. Jade was completely floored. She had never seen anything like it. In her world, insults were met with sharper insults, power plays with bigger power plays. But Lawrence had refused to engage on that level. He had risen above the filth, showing more class and character in that single moment than Julian had in his entire privileged life. This quiet display of dignity wasn't just impressive, it was a life-changing revelation for her. The incident solidified her contempt for her own gilded world. She looked at Julian, her fiancé, and for the first time, she saw him clearly a petty, cruel man whose only strength came from his family's name and bank account. He was spiritually bankrupt. In stark contrast, the homeless boy walking away possessed a richness of character that Julian could never comprehend, let alone purchase. The chasm between the two men was immense. This was the final nail in the coffin of her old life. The quiet dignity of Lawrence Warren was a beacon of light that exposed the deep-seated rot in her own social circle. The kindness and integrity he had shown from the beginning weren't a fluke, they were the very fabric of his being. Her feelings for him, a mix of admiration, affection, and now a fierce protectiveness, crystallized into something undeniable. It was love. As Lawrence disappeared down the path, leaving Julian sputtering in impotent rage, Jade knew she could never go back. She couldn't marry Julian. She couldn't live in that world of shallow cruelty anymore. Lawrence's response had not only won the moral victory of the day, but it had also unlocked a deeper curiosity in her. What other hidden depths, what other strengths were concealed within this remarkable man? After the incident with Julian, something shifted. Jade's visits were no longer just a pleasant escape, they became a vital necessity. She sought Lawrence out the very next day, an apology tumbling from her lips, but he simply waved it away, more concerned about how she was feeling. Their secret friendship deepened, moving into a territory of profound trust and emotional intimacy. She started to see beyond his circumstances and into the brilliant mind they concealed. She discovered, to her surprise, that Lawrence was incredibly intelligent. He spoke about history, philosophy, and science with a passion that was infectious. He explained that he had been a scholarship student at a top university, studying urban planning, of all things. His dream wasn't to get rich, it was to design sustainable, compassionate housing solutions for people in need. He wanted to help others, to fix the very system that had ultimately failed him. His dreams had been crushed by a cruel twist of destiny. A sudden family tragedy had forced him to drop out of school to care for a sick parent. When they passed away, the medical debt was astronomical. One misfortune led to another in a domino effect, until he lost everything, ended up on the streets. It was a heartbreaking story, not of personal failure, but of a good man being swallowed by circumstances beyond his control. This knowledge reframed everything for Jade. He wasn't just a homeless boy with a good heart, he was a visionary whose potential had been tragically stolen. Listening to him talk about his ideas for community building and social support, she realized the world had lost a brilliant mind. This was a man who deserved to be leading a foundation, not fighting for scraps in an alley. The injustice of it all ignited a fire within her. Their love story was blossoming in these deep, meaningful conversations. She respected him, not just for his kindness, but for his intellect and his shattered, but not forgotten ambitions. She began to see a future, a life-changing possibility where his dreams could be resurrected. She, the rich heiress, had the resources, and he, the man with nothing, had the vision and the soul. Together, they could actually change the world. But while their bond was strengthening in the shadows, they were being watched. Julian, humiliated and incensed by Jade's growing defiance and her inexplicable connection to Lawrence, was not a man to let things go. His jealousy had festered into a dangerous obsession. He couldn't stand the thought of losing to a nobody. His pride demanded action, and his next move would be far more direct and brutal than a mere public insult. Julian's bruised ego was a dangerous thing. Fueled by a toxic cocktail of jealousy and entitlement, he couldn't accept defeat. In his mind, Lawrence Warren wasn't a person, but an obstacle, a piece of trash that needed to be swept away. If public humiliation didn't work, then fear would be his next tool. His plan was simple and cruel: hire a couple of thugs to harass Lawrence, to make his life so unbearable in that specific part of the city that he would be forced to leave. The harassment started subtly at first. A friendly warning to move along, a misplaced kick to his few belongings. But it quickly escalated. These men, hired for their brutishness, made it their mission to terrorize him. They would corner him in alleys, threaten him, and ensure he couldn't find a moment's peace. Their message was clear: this area, the place where he met Jade, was now off limits. They were determined to drive him away. This was a new kind of test for Lawrence, a challenge not to his dignity, but to his physical safety. It was a direct consequence of his connection with Jade, a plot twist that brought real danger into his already precarious existence. He was just one man against hired muscle. The smart thing to do, the logical thing, would be to disappear. Find a new corner of the city, a new park bench, and fade back into the anonymity that had once protected him. But running away wasn't in his nature. There was a principle at stake. Leaving would mean letting the bullies win. It would mean surrendering the one place where he had found a genuine human connection, a glimmer of hope. His destiny felt tied to that park, to his conversations with Jade. Fleeing felt like a betrayal of that nascent love, and in a way, a betrayal of himself. So he stayed, enduring the threats with a quiet, stubborn resilience. The thugs grew more aggressive, their frustration mounting at Lawrence's refusal to be intimidated. They were looking for a reason to escalate, to turn their threats into physical violence. The situation was a powder keg waiting for a spark. Julian, from a distance, was getting impatient. He wanted the problem of the homeless boy solved, permanently erased from the picture, so he could reclaim what he saw as his property. Jade Long. What Julian and his hired goons didn't count on was that their next act of aggression wouldn't go unnoticed. They thought they were operating in the shadows, harassing a man no one would care about. They were about to make a grave miscalculation, for their next move would be witnessed by the very person they were trying to keep away, setting the stage for an act of incredible, unexpected courage. The confrontation came to a head on a gray, overcast afternoon. Julian's thugs, emboldened by their impunity, decided to up the ante. They found Lawrence sharing a small sandwich with an elderly homeless woman named Mary, a frail but spirited soul he had taken under his wing. Seeing her as an easy target to provoke Lawrence, one of the thugs roughly shoved Mary, trying to grab her half of the sandwich, mocking her weakness. It was a disgusting act of cruelty. That was the line. Lawrence could endure threats against himself, but he would not stand by while they harmed someone more vulnerable. In a flash, he was on his feet, placing himself between the thugs and the terrified woman. "Leave her alone," he said, his voice low and steady, but charged with a protective fire they hadn't seen before. "Your problem is with me. Her, you will not touch." He didn't have the muscle, but he had a spine of steel. It was a courageous, almost foolish act of defiance. The two men were bigger, stronger, and ready for a fight. They laughed, shoving him back. But Lawrence didn't back down. He stood his ground, shielding Mary with his own body, ready to take whatever punishment they were about to dish out. It was a pure, instinctual act of overcoming fear for the sake of another, a testament to his unwavering character. His kindness was not passive, it was fierce. And from across the street, partially hidden behind a large oak tree, Jade Long saw everything. She had come for her daily visit, only to stumble upon this horrifying scene. She watched, her heart in her throat, as the homeless boy she had come to love transformed into a lion, protecting one of the most defenseless members of his pride. It was a raw, heart-aching display of heroism that no amount of money could ever buy. This was the real man, tested by fire. She saw the thugs raise their fists, and her first instinct was to scream, to run for help. But she was frozen, mesmerized by his bravery. He was willing to sacrifice his own safety for a near stranger. This secret act, which he thought no one of importance would ever see, was the ultimate proof of his worth. It was an act of redemption, not for him, but for her entire worldview. He was without a doubt the best man she had ever known. Before the first punch could land, the sound of distant sirens, perhaps called by a concerned bystander, caused the thugs to hesitate and then quickly flee. Lawrence, shaken but resolute, immediately turned his attention to Mary, making sure she was all right. Jade slipped away before he could see her, her mind racing and her heart overflowing with a powerful mix of emotions: terror, admiration, and a fierce, unshakable love. Witnessing Lawrence's bravery was the final push Jade needed. It was no longer a matter of simple affection or admiration. She was in love with him, deeply and irrevocably. The image of him standing up to those thugs, protecting that elderly woman, was burned into her mind. It was a stark contrast to her fiancé, a man who would hire thugs to do his dirty work. The choice in her heart was clear, but the choice in her life was infinitely more complicated. She was torn. On one side was Lawrence Warren, a man who represented everything good and true in the world: kindness, integrity, courage. A future with him felt real, meaningful, a life-changing prospect. On the other side was her powerful family, an empire built on strategic alliances and public image. They expected her to marry Julian, to merge two dynasties, to fulfill the destiny that had been mapped out for her since birth. To choose Lawrence would be to declare war on her own family. It would mean social suicide, financial disinheritance, and a scandal of epic proportions. The rich heiress running off with a homeless boy with tabloids would have a field day. Her family would never understand, let alone approve. They would see it as an act of rebellion, a betrayal of everything they stood for. The pressure was immense, an emotional weight that felt like it could crush her. She spent the next few days in a torment of indecision. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Lawrence's dignified face. But every time she walked through her family's mansion, she felt the crushing weight of her obligations. Could she really turn her back on everything she had ever known? Did she have the strength to withstand the storm that would inevitably follow? Was her love for him strong enough to be her shield? The conflict raged within her, a battle between her heart and her legacy. But then she remembered the emptiness, the soul-crushing loneliness of her life before she met him. She remembered the fake smiles and the greedy eyes. That world was a prison, and Lawrence was the key to her freedom. Staying would mean a slow emotional death. Choosing him, as terrifying as it was the only choice that led to life. She realized she had to do more than just choose. She couldn't just run away with him. That would solve nothing. She had to dismantle the system that had trapped her and punished him. An audacious, brilliant, and incredibly risky plan began to form in her mind. It was a plan that would not only allow her to be with Lawrence, but would also give him the platform he deserved. It was time to stop hiding. It was time to make a move. Jade's plan was a high-stakes gamble, a perfectly orchestrated plot twist designed to expose the truth in the most dramatic way possible. The centerpiece of her strategy was her family's annual high society charity ball, the biggest social event of the year. It was a place where fortunes were pledged and reputations were made or broken. It was the perfect stage. Her first move was to arrange for a mysterious package to be delivered to Lawrence. One evening, as Lawrence was settling into his usual sheltered spot, a courier approached him. The man handed him a sleek, expensive-looking box with no return address. Confused, Lawrence opened it. Inside, nestled in silk paper, was a perfectly tailored tuxedo and a single heavy stock invitation card. It was an invitation to the Long family annual charity gala. His name, Mr. Lawrence Warren, was written in elegant calligraphy. He was completely bewildered. It had to be a mistake, a cruel prank. Why on earth would he, a homeless boy, be invited to the most exclusive event in the city? He looked at the suit, a garment more expensive than everything he had ever owned combined. The whole situation felt surreal, a dream from which he would soon wake up. There was no explanation, no note, just the invitation and a car service number to call for a pickup on the night of the event. Despite every instinct telling him it was a trap or a joke, a sliver of curiosity and a strange sense of destiny compelled him to consider it. Perhaps it was connected to Jade, the kind woman from the park, though he couldn't imagine how. He thought about the kindness she'd shown him, the only bright spot in his recent life. An unexpected part of him wanted to see her world, just for a night. Maybe this was a sign, a chance. The invitation was a Trojan horse, a secret weapon delivered by the hidden rich heiress herself. Jade had arranged everything anonymously, using a trusted assistant to ensure her name was nowhere to be found. She needed Lawrence at that ball, not just as a guest, but as the catalyst for the entire evening. It was a crucial part of her plan, for redemption and revelation. And so, on the night of the gala, driven by a force he didn't understand, Lawrence made the call. He put on the suit, which fit him like a second skin, and stepped into the waiting luxury car. As the vehicle whisked him away from the gritty streets he knew and toward the glittering heart of the city's elite, he had no idea he was heading directly into the eye of a storm, a life-changing night that would alter his future forever. The car pulled up to a magnificent ballroom, its entrance swarming with paparazzi and city elites dripping in diamonds and silk. When Lawrence Warren stepped out, he felt like an astronaut landing on an alien planet. The suit he wore was a perfect disguise, allowing him to blend in visually, but internally, he was screaming. He was a homeless boy who, just hours earlier, was worried about where his next meal would come from. Now he was walking a red carpet. The sheer scale of the opulence was overwhelming. Crystal chandeliers the size of cars hung from vaulted ceilings. Champagne flowed from fountains, and the air hummed with the quiet, confident chatter of immense wealth. Every glance, every piece of jewelry, every whispered conversation seemed to represent a fortune that could feed a small country for a year. He felt an emotional wave of dizziness wash over him. This wasn't just a different world, it was a different universe. He clutched a glass of water, his knuckles white, trying to make himself as small as possible in a corner of the vast room. He felt like an imposter, a fraud waiting to be discovered and violently ejected. The people around him moved with an easy grace, a sense of belonging that was as foreign to him as the language they spoke, a language of stock markets, summer homes, and casual extravagance. It was the world of the rich heiress, and he was an unwelcome ghost within it. His heart pounded in his chest. Why was he here? What was the purpose of this bizarre surprise? He scanned the crowd, a sea of unfamiliar, smiling faces that felt more menacing than a dark alley. He was looking for a sign, a clue, anything that would explain this madness. He felt a profound sense of isolation, a loneliness that was somehow sharper and more painful here, surrounded by hundreds of people, than it ever was on the empty streets at night. He saw the waste, the casual decadence, and couldn't help but think of the starving people just a few miles away. The contrast was a physical blow, a moral gut punch. This lavish party, celebrating charity, felt like the most profound hypocrisy. The sheer amount of money spent on the event itself could have been a life-changing sum for so many. The experience was solidifying a deep-seated contempt for a system that allowed such disparity to exist. He was on the verge of turning around and fleeing back to the familiarity of his own world, to the harsh reality he understood. He decided to give it 5 more minutes, and if no explanation presented itself, he would vanish. But just as he was about to make his escape, a familiar sneering voice cut through the ballroom's gentle murmur, and he knew his time as an anonymous guest was over. It was Julian. Of course it was Julian. He spotted Lawrence from across the room, and his face, initially confused, twisted into a mask of theatrical outrage. He marched toward Lawrence, his entourage of sycophants trailing behind him like pilot fish on a shark. The moment he had been waiting for, a chance to utterly destroy his rival on his own turf, in front of everyone who mattered, had arrived. It was an unexpected gift, and he intended to savor it. Well, Julian announced, his voice booming to ensure he had an audience. I must be dreaming. Someone, please tell me this gutter filth, this thing is not actually breathing the same air as us. He circled Lawrence like a predator, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. Security, he bellowed, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at Lawrence. We have a street rat infestation. Get it out of my sight before it taints the crystal. A hush fell over the immediate area as guests turned to witness the drama. Lawrence just stood there, frozen, the suit that had felt like armor a moment ago now feeling like a ridiculous costume. The humiliation was white-hot and absolute. To be called out, to be degraded in front of this sea of powerful people, was a nightmare made real. Julian was not just insulting him, he was making a public spectacle of his poverty, using it as a weapon to entertain the crowd. Julian leaned in close, his voice a venomous whisper for Lawrence's ears only, though his smug expression was for everyone else. Did you really think you could put on a suit and belong here? You are nothing, a speck of dirt on the heel of my shoe. Then, raising his voice again, he shouted, I want him thrown out. Now! And someone check their wallets. God knows what Hayes already stolen. This was the ultimate power play, designed to crush Lawrence completely. Security guards, large men in black suits, began to move purposefully through the crowd toward Lawrence. For them, it was a simple command from one of the event's most important figures. The guests watched with a mixture of amusement, pity, and indifference. This was just a bit of evening entertainment. The fate of this homeless boy was sealed. He was about to be unceremoniously ejected, his brief, surreal journey into this world ending in utter disgrace. This was the climax of Julian's cruelty, the peak of his arrogance. He had cornered his prey and was about to deliver the killing blow. He smiled, triumphant, believing he had won. But this carefully orchestrated scene of humiliation was about to be hijacked by a plot twist so stunning, so audacious, that it would be talked about in these circles for years to come. Just as the guards reached for Lawrence's arm, another voice cut through the air. Stop. The voice was calm, clear, and carried an authority that made the security guards freeze in their tracks. The crowd parted, and there stood Jade Long looking radiant in a stunning evening gown, her expression one of cold, controlled fury. She walked not to her fiancé Julian, but directly to Lawrence's side, placing a protective hand on his arm. The collective gasp from the onlookers was almost comical. This was a surprise of the highest magnitude. She turned to the guards. This man, she said, her voice ringing with conviction, is my personal guest. You will not lay a hand on him. She then fixed her gaze on Julian, and the warmth in her eyes was replaced by ice. And you, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, have just made the biggest mistake of your life. The public defiance, the open defense of the homeless boy against her own fiancé, sent shockwaves through the ballroom. Julian was stunned into silence, his face a mixture of disbelief and rage. Her family, watching from their table of honor, looked equally horrified. This was not part of the plan. Jade was supposed to be a dutiful daughter, an elegant accessory, not a rebel defending a street rat. She was shattering years of tradition and expectation in a single bold move. It was a life-changing moment of public rebellion. Jade wasn't finished. She took Lawrence's hand, a gesture of solidarity that was as intimate as it was defiant. "The only person here who is filthy," she declared, her eyes sweeping across the stunned faces of the city's elite, "is the one who judges a man by the contents of his wallet instead of the content of his character." The accusation hung in the air, a direct indictment of the values held by nearly everyone in the room. This was more than just defending a man, it was a declaration of her own values, a public alignment with Lawrence and a rejection of Julian, and everything he represented. The emotional power of the moment was immense. She, the rich heiress, was publicly choosing the homeless boy over one of their own. She was choosing kindness over cruelty, integrity over influence. The power dynamic of the entire evening had just been flipped on its head. Ignoring the frantic whispers and shocked stares, Jade turned to Lawrence, her eyes softening. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. He could only nod, completely speechless. He was just beginning to understand the depth of what was happening. This wasn't a prank. It was a revolution, and he was at the center of it. Jade gave his hand a reassuring squeeze, then turned her determined gaze toward the stage at the front of the ballroom. Leading a still-dazed Lawrence by the hand, Jade walked directly toward the stage, her every step radiating purpose. The murmuring of the crowd grew into a loud buzz of confusion and frantic speculation. Her family was gesturing wildly for her to stop, and Julian looked as if he was about to explode. But Jade was a woman on a mission, and nothing was going to deter her now. This was her moment, the culmination of her secret life and her newfound convictions. She ascended the small set of stairs to the stage, never letting go of Lawrence's hand, pulling him up with her to stand beside the podium. The gala's host, a flustered-looking man, made a move to intervene, but a single withering look from Jade sent him scurrying away. She tapped the microphone, and the resulting sharp sound silenced the entire ballroom. Hundreds of pairs of eyes were now fixed on her and the mysterious, tuxedo-clad man beside her. The climax was here. The air was thick with anticipation. This was supposed to be a night of polite speeches and generous donations, not a family drama, playing out in real time. Jade stood there for a moment, letting the silence stretch, gathering her strength. She looked out at the sea of facetious parents, her so-called friends, the captains of Industriand. Then she looked at Lawrence, whose bewildered expression was slowly being replaced by dawning comprehension. She was about to detonate a bomb in the middle of her own life, and she knew the shrapnel would hit everyone she had ever known. This was her true coming-out party, not as a debutante, but as her own woman. She was ready to reveal the truth about her secret identity, not the one she used on the streets, but the one she had been forced to play in these very rooms, the role of the silent, obedient heiress. Her purpose at this gala was no longer about charity, it was about justice. It was about exposing the hypocrisy of a world that celebrated wealth while scorning poverty, that valued connections over compassion. This was her act of redemption, not just for herself, but for the man standing beside her, a man whose worth they were incapable of seeing. The ultimate plot twist of the evening was about to be revealed. She leaned into the microphone, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her words echoing through the silent, cavernous hall. "I'm sure you're all wondering what's going on. For years you have known me as Jade Long, the heiress. Tonight, I'm going to tell you who I really am, and I'm going to introduce you to the most honorable man I have ever met. Let's start with my fiancé, Julian," Jade announced, her voice ringing with cold clarity. She recounted, in precise detail, his brutal humiliation of Lawrence in the park and his recent hiring of thugs to intimidate a defenseless man. She exposed his cruelty, his arrogance, and his spiritual bankruptcy for all to hear. Julian's face went from red with rage to pale with shock as his pristine public image was systematically dismantled in front of his peers. Therefore, Jade concluded, pulling the enormous diamond ring from her finger, "I am officially and publicly ending our engagement." I will not be associated with a man of such vile character." She dropped the ring onto the stage, where it clattered with a sound of finality that echoed through the stunned silence. Before her family could react, she moved to the core of her announcement. "For my entire life, I have been surrounded by immense wealth, but I have been searching for something of true value. I finally found it, not in a boardroom or at a gala, but on a cold street corner, through a simple act of kindness from a homeless boy who shared his last piece of bread with a stranger." She turned to Lawrence, her eyes shining with tears and love. "This man, Lawrence Warren, whom my former fiancé called a street rat, has more integrity, intelligence, and compassion than anyone in this room. He had a dream of building a better world, a dream that was stolen from him by misfortune." The room was absolutely silent, every guest hanging on her every word. This was more than a speech, it was a life-changing manifesto. "So tonight, I am making a new pledge," Jade declared, her voice soaring with passion. "I am announcing the formation of a new foundation. A foundation dedicated to tackling the root causes of homelessness and poverty with innovative, compassionate solutions. And this foundation will be funded by my entire inheritance, my entire share of the Long family fortune." The gasps were audible this time. She was giving it all away. And she said, delivering the final stunning blow, "This new foundation will have only one person I trust to lead it with vision and integrity. Its new president and CEO will be Mr. Lawrence Warren." She raised his hand in hers, presenting him to the shocked audience. It was the ultimate surprise, the most incredible plot twist. The homeless boy was now the head of a multi-billion-dollar foundation. It was a moment of perfect redemption. Not just for Lawrence, who was being given the chance to fulfill his dreams, but for Jade, who had finally broken free from her gilded cage. It was the triumphant culmination of their unexpected love story, a testament to the power of kindness and the unpredictable nature of destiny. The two of them stood on that stage, hand in hand, facing a new future they would build together. And so, from a single selfless act over a piece of bread, an entire world was changed. We've witnessed a journey that took us from the harshest streets to the most opulent ballrooms, proving that true worth is never measured in dollars, but in dignity and kindness. The story of Lawrence and Jade is a powerful testament to how one small moment can rewrite destiny. It's an unlikely love story, yes, but it's also a story of overcoming, of redemption, and of the incredible life-changing power of seeing the good in others, even when the world encourages us not to. It truly makes you wonder, doesn't it? What is the real definition of wealth? And how much potential is hidden in the people we pass by every single day? This story was a roller coaster, and we would love to hear how it impacted you. What was the one moment that touched you the most? Was it Lawrence's quiet dignity in the face of humiliation, or Jade's defiant courage on that stage? Share your most impactful moment in the comments below. We read every single one. And tell us, did you see that final plot twist coming? Or were you hoping for a different ending? We're curious to know what you think. If this story moved you and you believe in its message, please help us spread it by giving this video a thumbs up. It truly helps the channel grow. And if you want to be part of our community and not miss out on the next incredible story, make sure you click subscribe and ring that notification bell. We have a library full of older videos for you to explore. While you wait, and we can't wait to see you on the next one.